That's not okay. If I need to, I can walk over and do the projections. Don't let that shit behind me throw y'all off. About internal building, and I'm going to use a lot of terms that may not be familiar with you. If I do not explain it, stop me in my tracks and go, "What the hell are you talking about?" Okay, that's totally cool. It's fine. I'm going to cover some of these topics kind of briefly, and each thing that I'm going to talk about. If it's a dead topic and y'all don't want to talk about it, there's no discussion around it or anything like that, we'll just go on to something else. And these are in no order, but movement's not movement. And that's going to be about how we build political movements, not just one political movement. I'm going to talk about anarchism and the ideas around anarchism, the philosophies of anarchism. I'm going to talk about dual power as a framework for organizing, which these are all mysteries right now, but will be revealed. I'm going to talk about another framework that I use called Dream the Future, Know Your History. I'm going to maybe touch on action campaigns, but I think we're going to skip that. And we're going to talk about the state a little bit and private security. Talk about healthy groups, and then we're going to talk about power and privilege within political movements. Most everything I'm going to talk about tonight is going to have a political reference, but that doesn't mean it's all political. Really what I want us to do is look at other ways to think about these things and to create new movements. Can we agree with that? Is that cool with that? Just as in my own story, I am a lifelong community organizer. I've been an activist and organizer for about almost 25 years now. I've worked in environmental issues, animal rights issues, poverty issues, a myriad of things over the decades. I worked within electoral politics. I worked with the Green Party, as anybody remember the Green Party. I worked to get people elected, but I've signed petitions and got done petitioning. I've worked in a lot. Dumped all that stuff about 12 or 13, well, almost 14, 15 years ago now, and started to work on grassroots organizing much more, which is to recognize the power that we have. So tonight, when I talk about things, I'm going to talk about my personal narrative a lot. And the reason I want to tell these stories is not because I want y'all to think that I am a hero or that I've done these things that you cannot do, but hopefully that you will see yourselves in these stories and that you can recognize what you can do as an individual and what we can do as communities and as groups of people. And we can start to build power from below. Being an old man, I've been around for a minute, and so I have, just to give you context, like I haven't just worked in an office a long time. I do the heavy lifting a lot, and I believe it's really important. I've spoken to the media countless times. I've been interviewed numerous times, but that's only one part of it. The other part of it is doing the dishes, doing the hard, dirty work that nobody ever sees and nobody gets thanks for. Anybody here ever done the dishes? Yeah, right? In leadership and work, it's important to do the dishes. It's important to do the child care. It's important to do these other things besides just being the person that talks about stuff, generates ideas, is the out front stuff. So I've done a lot of that. I've also been targeted by the state. I'm listed as a domestic terrorist in the United States. I was targeted by the FBI and Homeland Security. I was targeted by the FBI for about 10 years, severely investigated. They sat in front of my house for about 4 years. They tried to get me for arson in nine states. 13 field offices investigated me from 1999 until about 2008. It may still be ongoing now, and I don't know it. There's been 5 informants in my life. These are people who turn evidence on you for political reasons, and then to get me to commit crimes or to tell about crimes that I might commit. To get me in prison. A bunch of my friends have gone to prison in the last decade for political work, mostly around environmental issues and animal rights issues. I have an adversarial relationship with the police, to say the least. They've almost killed me on 3 different occasions, where they laid me face down on the ground, or they put guns to my head in different scenarios. So when I talk to you about these things, I'm not talking to you from a theoretical standpoint. I will talk about some theory and some ideas, but I'm going to tell you I have practical application for it. But the stuff I'm telling you, those are extremes of things that are happening, right? The most of the stuff happens is the everyday thing. making flyers, talking to people, reaching out, having community organizing and stuff like that. So that's where I come from in that stuff. And you know, I have a lot of privilege in what I do, being a white male in this country, and I recognize it. I'm not guilty about it. I use it in every way I can to help support communities who are marginalized, people who are marginalized, because I have the will to do that. And I think it's important because helping to build other communities and other neighborhoods and people's up, helping them to help themselves, helps all of us to build stronger fabrics of communities. So that's kind of the premise of where I'm at. How many people here have participated in the Occupy stuff in the last fall?
I live in New York.
Yeah. Just a few of you? Has anybody here had much political organizing experience, been an activist or doing very many things? Just in general? Yeah, a little bit? Yeah, I heard you say union organizing earlier. You know, so some of the things I might talk about might seem like alien concepts in some ways, but again, I'm just going to give you a point of reference on that. You know, in organizing, I was tied in the system just like all of us are. We're all born and raised in the system. But I knew that something was wrong, something was different. The community I lived in, I grew up in a farm and factory town. There was U.S. Steel, there was Resist All hats, there was an International Paper, where the three big factories in my house. I grew up right down from U.S. Steel. I could hear them welding and doing stuff all night, all the time. I grew up by railroad tracks. There was also a farm town just outside of Dallas. But I always knew something was wrong. Like, what was different about the community I lived in was different than everybody else's community. You know, we didn't own our house. We always rented, and like, you know, I didn't have a stable family and stuff. And I was like, but there's something wrong. But it took a long time for me to get political understanding of what that was, and a political framework to kind of start to explain some things. And when I say explain things, I don't mean like great magical understanding of like, oh yes, this explains everything completely and we can understand it like a great religion or something. It's just a set of ideas. And so I was turned on to anarchism in the 80s through punk rock. Anybody here listen to punk, hardcore? Come on, shit, yeah, of course, of course. So, but most of the punks that I met then, I thought were assholes. You know, the anarchists I met then were narcissistic, they were nihilistic, and they were very bad representations of it. And in a very small scene in Dallas, I mean, that was, you know, I'd be at a TSOL show. Everybody remember True Sounds of Liberty or Agnostic Front or something. And these guys were total assholes. I was like, they gave anarchism a bad word, a bad rep. And so but over another couple of decades, I started to read more and started to understand more and got turned on to anarchism. And anarchism is just basically a set of ideas on common sense, based on common sense. It's the belief and the practices that we all, as individuals, can come together and make decisions that affect our lives directly, without just being voters and without being just consumers. That there's another path or a set of paths in the middle there that we can do. And the basic premises of the ideas are the one based on cooperation and mutual aid. The idea that I don't want to do better on the backs of you or you or you, and I don't want you to do the better on the backs of me. That we would do better because it's beneficial to both of us, to all of us. And it's also the idea of direct action. The idea is that we are not waiting on somebody else to make choices, to make that change. If I see a problem, or if we see a problem, we work to fix it the best that we can with the tools that we have. Now, how fucking powerful is that? You know, instead of calling the cops or calling the city to fix something, how is it to get a shovel and fill a pothole? How is it to watch your neighbor's animals for them? You know, to do small things that start to build to bigger things. And like, there's a myriad of examples. We could talk about a lot of examples. But the idea also of self-determination and self-defense, that we have a right as individuals to determine our own futures. Not my future at the expense of you, again, or you at the expense of me, but us together, that we can determine ourselves, and that we have the right to defend those things as individuals and as communities. So when a community is under attack, then we have a right to defend ourselves, and whatever that means, whether it's political attack, religious attack, or under attack from the state, that we have a right to defend it. And defending it doesn't necessarily mean guns or beating people, but we have a right to stand and defend ourselves. right? Are y'all with me so far?
Yeah.
Is it boring?
No.
All right, is there any questions so far? Yeah, does anybody want to throw in on what else anarchism could mean to them, or what it has mean to them without pontificating for a long time? It's a good catch.
I was in a town, there's a real specific case when I was working with Occupy Somewhere Else, because people always say, well, you want the police, and there was a young man who was beating up this woman, and he had threatened to do it again, and she didn't want to call the police, and the anarchists came to his house in the middle of the night, and Mike checked him.
Damn right.
And said, we will come out here and talk about this every night until you stop. We will protect her, we will put somebody with her, and if you hurt her, we will stop you.
Right.
And it stopped.
So that right there is mutual aid or cooperation and direct action, right? Without relying on somebody else to do it. No, we don't know what ever happened with the whole thing because it's always complicated, right, in practicing these things. But anarchism just makes sense as a political reference for the things that we do. And anarchism, in my estimation, it's little a anarchism. It's not like big C communism or big C capitalism. It's little a anarchism. It's because if we all decided together not to call it that, I would drop it in a second. But right now it's a point of reference for what we do. It's not a rigid set of ideas or philosophies. It's just a baseline of values and principles to work from.
What do you think about RSR, Radical Self-Reliance?
I don't know. What do you think about it?
I like it as both for communities, civilizations, and individuals.
Right. And some of the ideas within anarchism is autonomy. Now you would say, like, well, autonomy is contradictory to cooperation, but it's not. Because autonomy is that I have an autonomous person, that we don't have to have groupthink about everything. But I have responsibility in my autonomy with the people that I'm engaging with, right? But also autonomy as communities, that we don't have to franchise everything. Every community, we don't want it to look the same. What anarchism to me, and I think is a great illustration, is look at it like bioregions. You know how a forest looks the same everywhere, but it's different when you get to it? A forest on the East Coast does not look like the same exactly as a forest on the West Coast. It has similar elements to it, right? Or a forest here in Central Texas, right? Similar elements, but they all look different. They're made up of different trees, different plants, different flora and fauna, right? That's the way I envision anarchism, is that communities aren't exactly the same, but they have same guiding principles. And another crappy analogy I will use around this is that instead of all of us getting into one big boat and saying, hey, we're going to go to this common goal on the horizon, that anarchism presents the idea that we can get into separate boats. Some people are going to get into little rafts. Some people are going to get into big giant ships. Some people are going to get into armadas together. But we all head towards the same common goals, and people get there as they want, and we don't try to sink each other's boats. Because if I have to get in one big boat with somebody, I'm going to shoot them, right? Isn't that kind of what's happened? We're all thrown together in these situations. We're like, well, actually, I don't really agree with that person, right?
Because all of our circumstances aren't really the same as others. That's why it's hard to see eye to eye with somebody who you may feel like they don't work as hard or they don't have it as bad or haven't seen life the way you
That's
have.
right.
So you don't really relate to them the same way. So your common goal may take a little longer or may have a different journey. So
That's right. And I don't want to sink their boat. Like, hey, go to town. As long as you're not doing destructive stuff and you're not trying to sink other boats, just go on your way.
And I don't have to be in the boat with them.
Absolutely. I don't want to be. Yes.
Can you define anarchism in terms of what it is not? Instead of saying,
Well, yeah, I think it's
instead of saying anarchism is this and then saying it's like this, it's like that, can you say anarchism is its own thing, has its own definition, but is definitely not this?
Who thinks anarchism is chaos?
At its core, in an actual definition of the term, yeah.
I would debate you on that, but I don't want to right this second. But I would debate you on that.
Not
But who has heard that all their life?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Like, show of hands. Yeah, it's not chaos. Actually, the Greek root is absence of authority.
Anarchy. It's also Hebrew too.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, but again, this is not a historical lesson. I drive a forklift at a recycling center. I'm a community organizer, so I'm not a historian. But basically, and I'm not a linguist, but basically, it's the absence of authority. I mean, how powerful is that to not have a boss to look over your shoulder, or to have some elected government official that you didn't elect, or to have some police state or corporate entity that that has no accountability to you, right? Because in the ideas of anarchism, hang on one second, is that my ideal world, the way I would envision it and the way that I would hope that we would start to envision it is that we'd scale things back down. We'd start to make them manageable. Because the way we are, the things that were scaled up that they are, they're not manageable at all.
We can debate that later too.
Sure. But again, if I try to franchise it, I said, like, this is the only way that anarchism is, I'm going to run into people who say that's not the way anarchism is. There are so many strains of anarchism. There's green anarchy, there's feminist anarchism, there's primitivism, there's syndicalism, there's insurrectionary anarchism, there's platformist anarchism. I mean, these are just some of the major ideas. From those offshoots, there's trees and bushes that just like spread out. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess, how do you account for the natural chaos that would occur within, let's say hypothetically there was this anarchist society, correct? It would take time to progress into that, but there would still be individuals who have different mentalities about the situation. Maybe necessarily they didn't agree with the whole anarchist mentality. And then how would you account for like somebody going up and shooting a bunch of people and not being able to catch them because, you know, there was no way to catch them without like police force or whatnot?
That's the first part of this question, possibly?
Well, hang on.
Yeah,
You should come tomorrow to the police accountability thing. Tomorrow there's a big thing about peaceful streets. It's all about alternatives to police. And if you want to come, it's at Mahita's restaurant at 12th Street and I-35, and we're going to talk about these things. Not anarchist societies, how we do all these things, but how do we do things without the police.
Okay.
So, and I don't want to delve into it too much tonight unless a lot of people want to get into that. So not because I'm like trying to skirt it, like, but I definitely, we can talk. But the thing is, here's the beauty of it. Anarchism is going to look like, in my ideal vision of it, and what I would hope would be the vision of everybody, is that it's going to look different. It's going to look like things that we can't even imagine today. That if we started to build anarchist societies, and you notice I'm not using the word society, like civil society, like one word. It's societies, because it's plural. They're going to look differently. They might look like villages in some places. They might look like cities in other places. Some people might be feral and just live in the woods, you know, in a primitivist way. And the way that we organize, I'm not here to tell you how we're all going to do that. What I would challenge all of us to do is to challenge ourselves to start to imagine it and start to put it into practice. And you know, in anything, when you start to dream of better futures that are outside of the realm that we live in, because we're all like, you know, like in capitalism, we're all fish in water, right? Does anybody think that they're outside the capitalist system, even if you drop out of society and stuff like that? Because if you are, you're kidding yourself. We're all in it. I'm in it, right? And so it's hard for us to look on the shoreline out of the water, you know? But the thing is, I'm challenging us to do that and to begin eventually to take that walk onto the shore and to start to look at worlds that we have never even thought about. And so what we would think of today, in 20 years, it may not look like that. It may look totally different than that. And that those people who have come after us and we have thought about it and we've continued to practice things and said, hey, this is not a best practice, but this is a great practice, have developed things. And so I don't even know what it would look like. And that's not to sidestep it in any way. I really do believe that. And that's actually what I want.
So what are some problems that could arise from an anarchist, like, a set of societies?
What do you think?
I think like the primitive, almost like tribal warfare between the two different.
So did all tribes for 10,000 years fight?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I would argue that they didn't.
Not all of them did.
So what did we have in 10,000 years of history, right? And then especially the last 4,000 years of agriculture and stuff. We had different things. We had warring factions, but you had other ones that lived peaceably. So maybe an anarchist society, civil society would look like that. It would look all differently. We cannot imagine, we can't tell the future, we can just imagine what we look like. But if we don't start imagining it and trying to put it into play, we got nothing. Is everybody like the boat that we're in now?
I mean, it's all right.
The co-op.
It's all right?
I mean, I actually have. I mean, okay, one, you have the whole wide scale of communication in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that unified people as like countries and stuff like that. Because even though we were, I mean, it used to take, I had this conversation with someone earlier, but it used to take 2 months for someone from California to get to the other side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Now it takes a couple hours.
Right.
So to say that, okay, we can go back to living in towns or cities or suburbia, it's kind of the same thing. Like, someone has to build the towns, though, too. Someone has to build the cities, but then also someone has to keep up with them. How should they be compensated? If we're all on different boats, we all already are on different boats.
Are we?
Yeah.
I would argue that
Opportunity.
we are on the same boat. That the boat that we're in is on fire, and that if we don't change the way that we live, that it's going down.
It's a giant ball.
Right, because the fact that we're all sitting here is totally prefaced on the fact that people, animals, and the planet have been exploited for us to sit here. And I don't feel guilt about that. It's a rational understanding about that. And so for you to maintain the lifestyle that you have, or me to maintain the lifestyle that I have, is always going to take that exploitation at some level. So how do we eliminate it or we minimize it? Is what I would ask.
Are you a minimalist?
Do I seem like a minimalist?
Kind of.
Well, I mean, I don't know what that would mean to you, you know.
I mean, that's the other thing. Some of the things I don't know exactly what you're meaning because I don't know you. But,
Right.
You know, so are you saying we should use less so other people can have
No,
more?
no,
or are you
I'm
saying
talking about structural changes. I'm talking about totally rethinking everything that you have. Xbox, Coca-Cola, our cars, the housing that we have, the fact that we can run AC and leave the doors open. Not just environmental impacts of things, but the labor of it. The fact that the clothes that we wear, the fact that who did build these things, who maintains this stuff, who builds the highways. Like, it's labor, there's exploitation at every level. Again, we don't have to feel guilty about it, because guilt doesn't do anything. That's what we tell ourselves about it. But could we imagine, which is much harder because we're in these cages, to break free of those cages and go, I imagine a different world. I want a different world, and I want to start building that. And that's what anarchism and its aspirations offers us. Not as a rigid ideology, but as a set of ideas that we can build from that can look so many different frameworks from that.
I think the paradigmal that's a word. The paradigmatic utopia that you describe can really actually be pretty much like the internet in its ability to kind of function as a collective expression of the human collective consciousness. You're talking about what problem solving. Kickstarter is a good example, which I actually invented a year ago, but didn't decide to actually make, and then somebody else made billions of dollars. So I was kind of pissed about that. But
No, I think that's a great example.
I'm gonna do crowdsourced contract negotiations, so that's gonna make me money.
I think there's a lot of things we call it.
Yeah.
Like, again, whether we call it anarchism or not doesn't matter. Like open source.
But you have a problem. Open source, Linux, Pirates Bay, freedom of information. I mean, there's so much there that really. And I think, obviously Anonymous, look at Anonymous. They're the most, one of the most active forces in the Occupy movement, in the anarchical movement. But what's interesting about the internet is while it's this kind of anti-swarmal, thing with people everywhere, but it's still a unity. It's still one thing. It's still, it's an intranet, but it's a uninet at this point. There's no enclaves within the internet. I mean, there are, of course,
There
but
totally are.
there are, of course.
As we speak.
There are, and of course, if we're talking about like
Facebook is New York.
networks. Well, J8's New York. Facebook's New York.
Google is New York.
Google's California.
They're all building their own cities that they're trying to wall us in on, right? And
Of course.
And anytime that we build something out in the hinterlands of the internet, yeah, totally.
But we still have complete freedom in those hinterlands, like
Sure.
we don't in the hinterlands of the United States or within the boundaries of any National Geographic. Geopolitical system.
Sure. But hang on, hold it. I got
Sure.
I want to say
Yeah, of
one
course.
thing. Everything that I say here tonight